Good evening, everyone. This is the Great North Pagan Podcast. I am Thomas LionLord, soon to be Lionheart Punton. It is Monday, February 23rd, 2015. And as promised, we are continuing our second part in the Spiral Tree tradition. And with me I have right now is Bowman. And hello, Bowman. How you doing?
Hello, Thomas LionLord. I'm doing good.
That's good. Well, how about you tell the audience out there about yourselves?
Well, my magical name is Bowman. I've been practicing pagan Wiccan for about 9 years now. I live in Rugby, North Dakota. I'm married to Saracen, who's the High Priestess of Heart of the Pinnacle Fellowship, and also a former member of Order of the Aurora. But I guess maybe saying former isn't the best term, since we hived off of the Order of the Aurora and just sister covens now.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in just a little bit about that, and just to let the eagle-eyed audience know is that I'm pretty much will be asking Bowman kind of the same questions that I asked Phoenix and Sarashun as well, with an addition of another question as well. But this will be kind of an interesting perspective because, of course, he was there from the very beginning.
Yes.
From your perspective, tell how the Order got started, who started it, and then what was the major goals that you guys did at the time?
Well, Balana started it when she moved to Grand Forks in the fall of 2006. Her husband, Dan Morgan, got accepted to the doctorate program for medical doctor at Grand Forks, UND. And so, of course, she moved with him. She was a part of Grandmother Willow's coven in Little Rock, Arkansas, and decided, being a high priestess of the third degree herself, to start a group in Grand Forks. There were 3 college girls at UND that were part of the original Order of the Aurora. And then you had... well, she goes by many names, but I remember her most fondly as Anansi, who was originally from Walhalla. And then you had my former spouse, Inanna, and myself. So our original coven was 7. And we started meeting in the fall of 2006 informally, and became a formal coven at Candlemas, February 2nd, I think it was, 2007. The original goals were just to have a practicing group, just to spiritually fulfill like-minded people, and a lot of us, in fact, from my understanding, all of us were brand new to Wicca and paganism. And so Balana being the only experienced one, it was more of a learning session group for most of us, since we were pretty much all on the same page.
Did you start out with doing the major Sabbats on that, or any of the major rituals when you did that?
Yes. We would celebrate all the major Sabbats and Esbats, but we would meet every 2 weeks. And so when there wasn't a major holiday, we would celebrate full moons or dark moons. But we just started learning a lot of the basics, the elementals, and all about moon phases and just the base tenets of Wicca, until I was actually the first one to be initiated into first degree. And so at my initiation, it was just Balana and I, and then I subsequently helped Balana initiate 3 or 4 more of our group. I think out of the original 7, at least 4 were initiated into first degree, and then 1 moved away to California not too long after it started, and then my former spouse, Inanna, never was initiated into the first degree. So I believe out of the original 6, plus Balana, 4 of us were first degree.
Okay. So what major events did you do to get out into the community as you got started?
Well, speaking personally, I helped to organize open Sabbats and advertise them to the local community. And on the occasion where we did have open Sabbats, I would help lead or participate in them. B'Elanna, being the high priestess, did a lot of that. But I recollect, especially when I got to first degree, she had me writing and carrying out rituals all on my own. I remember the very first one I did, I believe, was Ostera, which would have been 2008, I think, was the first one I did. But I did 2 in a row, so I can't remember if it was one before Ostera or after. But yeah, I did a couple in a row, and that's how I helped with getting things out to the local community.
Did you get a lot of praise comments about a lot of those when you guys started out?
I think by that time, it had been close to a year and a half since B'Elanna had started the coven, and she was just happy, I think, to have another person in the teaching mix, that could actually be qualified to perform things. I do remember my test for first degree was actually on Christmas Day, which would have been 2007. Her and her husband Dan were out at our house visiting over Christmas. But yeah, I think that B'Elanna did a great job in the starting of the initial coven, and was just the stars aligned, and the gods smiled down on her favorably when she got 6 great students or candidates in her coven. And while I am, besides B'Elanna, the only original member still actively participating with the group, I do have fond memories about those early days. It's hard to believe it's coming on almost 9 years ago.
I know. I remember when Phoenix and Sarashoon, after we recorded, had showed the photo album of your guys' early days, and you could tell that as those days progressed, that you guys were getting like a fine-tuned wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So, what major strides did the order made to become a proper coven?
One of the most significant things that comes to my mind is, and I think B'Elanna brought this from the experience of her former coven, was we outlined as much as we could think of in bylaws that governed us, but we were flexible enough to modify, add or delete as voted on by the group. I think the only other major factor was the strong leadership that B'Elanna brought. She was, great at what she did, and but yeah, I think that's having a structured bylaws to govern us was probably one of the main initial successes of the coven, that it was laid out for you and didn't leave much to interpretation, but flexible enough to change when needed.
Yeah, because I've seen that from my own personal experience too, that you have to have at least that foundation to get the rules going, and flexibility as well, like you said too. Otherwise, it's hard to get that hold going.
And the reason I think, of B'Elanna fondly and the strong leadership department is that the very first group event, Sabbat, that I went to outside of our own in Grand Forks was we went to Beltane at Circle Sanctuary, which would have been spring of 2007, May 1st of 2007. And I remember B'Elanna's 3 members of B'Elanna's former group from Arkansas actually missed her so much that they came up to the same Beltane, even though that was quite a trip for them up from Arkansas. And so we got to meet 3 of her former coven, and I could just tell, even though we were a new group at that time, that they had such a fondness for her and a respect of her leadership that was inspiring to me, because we had already felt that way, after, in May of 2007, we would have been practicing with her for maybe, 6-8 months, and I could tell that from the other group. And so, Balana was really the instrument that brought a lot of this about, and with her leadership skills.
I'm going to be so interested to interview with her. She sounds like such an inspiration.
Yeah, she is. I was glad to hear that she started another group in Wichita, and as you've participated in yourself, we've Skyped with them a few times, and it'd be nice to one of these days get some FaceTime. I actually saw Balana for the first time in person last June at PSG. She had talked about coming, and a few different years, but finally made it last year, and it was nice to see her in person again.
I know. Again, seeing her Skype in her group, they're such a friendly bunch too. So I'm glad she's getting the ball rolling again.
Yes, it's exciting to see.
It reminds me of my inspiration, Tess, who I interviewed with, I think it was episode 3, I believe, and when she had ran her coven about 10 years ago too.
Yep.
So getting more.
If you realize, but before I met Balana and became involved in her coven, I actually studied a bit with Tess. Went to a few of her rituals in. I wanted to say Glenwood, but it's Granville.
Granville, yeah.
North Dakota, and she actually came to Rugby, and we had a couple of rituals here. I remember doing an early Samhain 2006, right before I started studying with Balana. I did an outdoor ritual with her and her husband and a couple of coveners here in a local rural area near Rugby. I've had interaction initially with Tess. I haven't seen her for a few years, but I have kept in contact. I think she's on my Facebook, and so I don't know if she's where she's at in the realm of her spirituality, but I didn't know if you knew that I had actually had quite a bit of interaction with her before Balana.
I knew Sershin did, but I didn't know if you did too. But that's interesting. That's a small realm after all, I guess.
There was another group in Minot. I can't remember the high priestess's name, but I went to a few events that they had. I never felt like I was part of any sort of inner circle. I was just on the peripheral. But then, in fact, I think Tess was a splinter off of her group, and her husband was a helicopter mechanic, and they ended up transferring down to Texas or something, so that kind of ended that. And then, given the choice between a brand new group being started by Balana or what Tess had going on, I went in the direction of Balana.
Yeah, I think I remember that other coven as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, getting more towards the present, so from your perspective, what did you think inspired help to create the sister coven of the Heart of the Pentacle?
Well, I knew that Sarah Shen had always wanted to be a minister spiritually. Ever since she was a kid, she finally had reached third degree, and for years and years, we had driven about 4.5 hours round trip every 2 weeks, hardly ever missed a meeting, to Order the Aurora in Grand Forks. And after, probably I'd have to think about it exactly, but probably after about 6 years of doing that, it finally sounded like a great idea that people would actually come to us most of the time, and we could have meetings right here without having to travel so far the meetings. And so it's hard to believe we now have 6-7 people about what we always had in the Order of the Aurora. It's over the years fluctuated. I think the lowest I ever remember it was maybe 4 or 5, and maybe it's gotten up to 8 or 9, but 7 seems to be kind of that number where it just kind of sticks around. And that's kind of where we are in rugby, and it's just hard to believe, even though we draw from Minot, but that a group like this can survive and thrive in a city as small as Rugby.
It's like just that seed that came off the plant, and it just grew nicely.
Yes.
So, from what you've experienced since the beginning, what do you think has been the formula that's helped, both the Order and the Heart of the Pentacle do so well after all this time?
Well, when I thought about this question from previewing, the questions you're going to ask for the podcast, some of the things that came to my mind was, more of a round table. I think a lot of times you get groups, whether they be spiritually or business or, where you have somebody that wants to be the grand poobah. And, a lot of times maybe that works in business sort of structures because, people are getting paid to do a job, and you're going to, if I'm paying you money to do this, you're going to do it how I want to do it. But when it comes to spiritual groups, I think having a round table where you have a leader, but somebody that is not dictating, what's going to happen, but it's a consensus. So I think the round table approach is important. Plain hard work. There's been people over the years, won't name names, but just have some sort of idea that they want a high priest or high priestess position and title, but don't really want to work to get there, or don't want to put in the work, just want things to sort of happen. And with something like this, things don't happen without a lot of hard work. And so, hats off to Phoenix and Saracen, because both of them, from my perspective, B'Elanna included with the original Order of the Era, did a lot of hard work and continue to do so. Dedication is another word that comes to mind. These high priestesses, it's a calling. They don't get paid for this. This is something that they do, and they're dedicated to doing it every couple of weeks for our Covenant's spiritual benefits. Perseverance is another word that comes to mind, because all of us, the wheel turns and we go through hills and valleys, ups and downs, and they're human just like the rest of us. And so to persevere through those, times of valley, is to be commended. We can all, when we're on the mountaintop, glory in the sunshine, but when you're in the shadows of the valley, you have to really be able to persevere through it. I guess the only other thing that came to my mind was capable leadership, and just because somebody wants to be a leader doesn't mean they really have the skills or the know-how or the knack for it. And so somebody that's capable, and of course B'Elanna and her predecessor Phoenix and then Saracen, they have all been, in my opinion, capable leadership.
It's like one of that we know of put it best. They can't have too many chieftains and not enough Indians. That
exactly.
you have to have at least some people to support it, as well as lead it as well.
It's true.
So now, if we got in touch with another coven, and maybe the high priest or high priestess said they're having a hard time getting their coven running, what best advice would you tell them?
You have to sit down with all the members involved and find out if this is something they all want. So many people just think that this is, they're used to other spiritual doctrines or institutions, entities, that they just show up. And I think, I used to be a Christian, and an old saying in our church that I think is probably can go across the board to other places is 90% of the work is done by 10% of the people. And so I think a lot of us get into a rut of having our hands held, that all we have to do is show up, and everybody should, be happy that that's what we did, is show up. Participating behind the scenes is a whole nother thing. So I guess to a coven that is in its infancy like that, I would sit everybody down and say, this is hard work. This is something that each and every one of you are going to have to work for. Nobody's getting a free meal here. So decide if that's what you're in for, is standing back in years to come and looking at a group that's developed through everyone's hard work, and you want to be a part of that, great. If you just want to go somewhere and be spoon-fed, then this is probably not going to have the longevity that you want. And I think once all the people that answer that question positively that are left over could go forth and make a thriving coven.
And I agree with that too, because from what I've seen from groups that have failed, is a lot of times they just get together and just chatter up. And sometimes it would not be anything pagan, Wiccan, or coven based at all. It's just like they were just hanging out, and then they say, "Oh, well, why is that not working?" Well, there's part of your problem.
Yeah, I think I've seen advertised. I'm not sure exactly where. I think I have an idea, but I really won't name cities. But where groups just meet at a coffee shop, and it's more of a social thing. And while I agree that spiritual groups are social avenues, it's true that's part of the reason why we get together, and that's fine. For people in their infancy that don't know whether, hey, do I want to be spiritually intimate with these other people? Starting out in a coffee shop, like that is a perfect place, just like you might on a date, to answer that question. But that's only going to go so far before you have to decide, if you're going to take that to the next level. And thinking that the coffee shop part of it is just going to be a coven, it's not. It's just a social meeting that has got to progress to a deeper level if it's going to.
I totally agree. Now, this is the interesting question I wanted to ask you, Bowman. Looking back, now that after we've now hit the 8-year mark, did you have any idea that the Order of the Roar would have gotten as far as it had from the very day that you guys did that ritual to start it all out?
Well, it's like a lot of things, LionLord. You start something like this with the best of intentions, but you don't really try to predict the longevity. At the time, I don't remember analyzing it and thinking my goal is to make it 5 years or 10 years. I mean, it's kind of like when I went into the military. I signed up for 4 years and figured at the end of the 4 years I was going to get out, or I was going to continue another 4 years. Well, I ended up staying in 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, it was time to move in a different direction. And I think a lot of us, when we start something like this, hope for the best, but never know where it's going to go, since it's so based upon the individuals involved on whether they want it to succeed. So, no, I guess at the time I just was so incredibly excited about finding a spiritual path that I feel had been speaking to me all my life, but because of social pressures, I could never really follow it until the point at which I did. And so I was just super excited and didn't really look into the future. I don't recollect analyzing how long this was going to go. I just figured it was going to go as long as everybody wanted it to. And so all these years later, it's just exciting to look back and see how much things have changed and how much growth has been accomplished over the years.
I was just curious about that because of that very reason too, because of seeing how much it's evolved. And since I've only known you guys since Samhain of 2010, seeing how much that had happened even before I met you guys, and now seeing you guys in these past 4 years, how much, like you said, it's evolved. I was just curious.
It's just amazing to me that, like I say earlier, I had studied a little bit with a group in Minot and a little bit with Tess, but right at the time we were starting to decide that we wanted a different spirituality, and search was almost exactly the same time Balana was moving to Grand Forks and starting this group. In fact, I remember doing a search on Yahoo, as I had before, with Tess and the Minot group. That's how I got in contact with them. And what wasn't there before all of a sudden was. And I'm like, how did I miss this group in Grand Forks? At the time I was asking myself that question, but it's later that I realized that I hadn't missed it. It hadn't been there a few months before when I was searching. So, I mean, the timing, the aligning of the stars, as you will, was just incredible for, I was wanting to, get on the ground floor of something at exactly the same time the ground floor was being started. Just timing, it's the aligning of the stars.
Yeah, it's amazing how the fates had woven the webs that made this happen. So from your perspective, then, what do you think the future of the Covens and their future events are planned? What do you think could expand from here?
Well, when I thought about this, I think the number one goal, at least from my perspective, would be positive growth. Many open Sabbats. We're about to have the first ever statewide Grand Sabbat. While it was Grant, Ridgway, and Fargo that proposed the idea of a Grand Sabbat, I actually took up the leadership position for that, and am the chairman of our 4-person committee currently planning that for this coming May 1st and 2nd, Beltane 2015. So the first ever statewide Grand Sabbat, we're hoping, I don't have any doubt with having, people there. It's just hopefully the weather will cooperate, and
of course,
the better the weather, the more frolicking people will want to do. All huddling around a campfire. That it's going to be what it's going to be. But that early in the spring in North Dakota can be iffy. So we're just kind of waiting to see how the weather holds up. But yeah, positive growth and having open events, I think, is what I see as the future of the Covens, because, traditionally a coven kind of splits off or hives after about 13 members, is about as big as it can get before it gets to be too large for the intended purpose. And, I think, 7 to 9 has been a good number. So I think the more growth we can have with having open Sabbats and statewide events, the more hive-offs we can have, and have this all kind of interrelated statewide, but yet separate individual groups of the same organization.
And I feel that too. I mean, I feel that there's a lot of hope, and since, like I said, the day I met you guys, I saw there was a lot of hope and positive energy, like I said too. Every time I met you guys, you always had that welcome home feeling, and
and that's what is inspiring. Is in my religious practices all my life, feeling connected to people on a spiritually intimate level has always been important to me, because I've always been able to connect with women on different levels, but when it comes to men, I've realized that I connect most with men on a spiritual level, not as much on an emotional level. Of course, I'm straight, so I don't connect on a physical level. Intellectual, maybe a little bit, but primarily I connect with men on a spiritual level, and so it's important to me to have more men in our groups, because predominantly Wicca, I think nationwide, attracts about 2/3 women and 1/3 men. So I'm hoping that we can, beat those statistics a little bit in the future, and maybe attract, an equal amount of men and women, even though that's not necessarily a requirement.
Oh, no, of course not, but I hope so too. Well, I think this has been a very wonderful insight to hear about how it all happened, where it has been, where it's going right now, and where it's going to be from you, Bowman. And I thank you so much for spending the time here with me about getting to know about this. And folks, we're not done yet. We're going to go back. we're gonna find Balana, and she's going to tell us. She was the one who founded it, and she's going to tell how it's all going to go.
Sure.
So this is Thomas LionLord Punton, and I thank you once again, Bowman.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And so merry meet, merry parts, and merry meet again.